think a really important idea to consider when you're trying to get over some issue that you have, or some obsession or fixation or addiction or any kind of negative psychological symptom that you're trying to get over, you're trying to work through, you're trying to get past, right? We all have them. I think that one of the most significant ideas in psychoanalysis is that when it comes to trying to get over some kind of psychological symptom that you have, right, that's negative. And when I say symptom, I'm just talking about any psychological ailment or fixation or issue that people have, right? So, just like if you have the flu, you're going to have symptoms of that. Well, people have different psychological symptoms. And I'm not talking actually about, at this point, about like really complex stuff like schizophrenia or whatever, right? I'm talking about the things that plague almost all of us at various times in our life, Oh, am I a people pleaser? Or do I find it hard to tell my parents the truth about something? Or do I find it hard to deal with this anxiety in my life or whatever, right? We've all got all of these different kinds of negative psychological symptoms and things that we get fixated on or hung up on or we just can't get past, and we don't know why. And one of the most interesting concepts in psychoanalysis that I think is really beneficial to helping with this is the idea that oftentimes our symptoms, our seemingly negative psychological symptoms, they're actually doing something positive for us, that we are actually getting something out of that we feel is good or we perceive as good, or maybe that is good, something out of those negative symptoms. At the same time that those negative symptoms could be causing us a lot of other problems or destroying our life even, or making us miserable, but in other ways they're doing something for us, right? Otherwise we wouldn't be so attached to them. And so this question of what is your negative symptom doing for you? What are you getting, as psychoanalysts often say, what are you getting out of it? This is an important question, because if you want to treat the root of a behavior or the root of a problem, and this is why therapists so often go back to childhood, and rightly so, but if you want to treat the root of a problem, or if you want to treat the engine of that problem, what is actually generating it, then one of the things that you have to address is the fact that you're probably getting something positive out of it, or at least that symptom is probably masking something even more alarming that you are unable to even get close to because it's so upsetting. And I'll give you an example of that in a moment. So this question of what is your symptom doing for you, it's a really important question. And also this notion that oftentimes, or at least sometimes, we can be having negative psychological symptoms because what those symptoms are doing is they're actually, as unpleasant as they are, they're actually masking a condition or a phenomenon or issues that are even worse or even scarier or even deeper. And so oftentimes, unfortunately, when people are trying to deal with their behaviors, they're just dealing with the sort of superficial appearance of the symptom, and they're not going deep into what is actually fueling it, because often what is actually fueling it is not only deeply unconscious or semi-conscious, but it's also something that the person is trying desperately to get away from, to repress, to not deal with. And so oftentimes the symptom itself is kind of like a red herring, or kind of a mask for what is actually going on. And so if the person just deals with the symptom, or tries to deal with the superficiality of the symptom, or tries to deal with just those behaviors instead of also looking at and attacking the root or dealing with the root, then from a psychoanalytic perspective, that's more difficult. And so I want to give you an example of this. I want to do something that I haven't done before. I want to talk about a private conversation that I've been having with one of my Patreon followers. And this was something that I told her I was going to do, and she's fine with, and I'm not going to use any names, and I'm not going to give away any information that would in any way disclose who this person is, right? And I think as we get into this, you'll see that this is actually a fairly common issue that a number of people have, although it can manifest differently than how it's manifested with this person. But I hope that as I go through this, I can help you to see how you might start to look at some of the problems that you're struggling with in a different way. And I'm not saying that this is a fix-all, or it solves or explains everything, right? But I'm just saying that it is, I've found, a really interesting and can be an effective way of helping at least to begin to work through things. All right. So one of the things that I offer on Patreon is a 30-minute session of just chatting. It's $29 a month. You get 29 minutes, and I'll just talk with you for however long you want. Well, not however long you want, but I'll talk with you about whatever you want, right? Within reason. Right? I have yet to have anyone actually bring up anything, offensive or uncomfortable, right? So that kind of stuff just doesn't happen as much as you'd think. Anyway, and it's not meant to be therapy or anything like that. It's just chatting. And in fact, most of the time, people just want to just chat about stuff. What am I doing today? Or what did I think about, the latest video I did? Or to tell me, they really enjoyed a particular video, or they want to introduce me to their dog or whatever, right? Whatever, different things, just chatting. But there are some people who want to talk about serious issues in their lives. And I'm not a therapist. Everybody knows I'm a therapist. It's not therapy. What it is it's basically me offering what I think a friend would offer. Okay, tell me what's going on in your life, and I'll give you feedback. And yeah, I've read a little more philosophy, a little more psychology and stuff than most people. But that's about it. But some interesting stuff does come up. And so there's a woman that I've been talking to. And she told me that she has been to a bunch of therapists, and she feels like it's not helping. So this is her issue. She is an alcoholic, and I don't want to give away her age, but let's just say under 40, and still considered youthful. She's now a self-described alcoholic. And also, she has a tremendous problem with jealousy. She told me that she feels this almost obsessive envy, a compulsive jealousy toward other people in her life that is so pervasive and so constant that she has to drink actually a lot to get relief from it. That really one of the only times that she says she gets relief from this jealousy is when she drinks. So she drinks a lot so that she can shut down that voice. And here's one thing I want to say, about substance abuse. I really hate the way that there's so many people in our society still who don't understand substance abuse, and they see it as just some kind of a moral failing. If that person is weak, or if that person could just get it together, or why is that person, just wanting to destroy themselves? Well, oftentimes what's actually going on, and it shouldn't take, a rocket scientist to see this, what's actually going on is that the person is, yes, using their substance to self-medicate for much deeper, more troubling problems, actually. And, I remember reading Russell Brand's book about recovery, it's a good book. It's really interesting. But he was talking about how after, years of drug abuse and, was even doing heroin and everything, right? Really hard stuff, that he finally, decided to get help, and he went to some kind of a clinic or rehab or whatever. And the woman who was doing the intake said to him, well, good for you for finding a way to cope all of these years with drugs. Like, she was actually saying to him, hey, you know what? Now it's time to leave the substance abuse behind, but I understand that you were doing this stuff because it was actually helping with deeper problems. Now, maybe overall, in the long run, it was more self-destructive, but, a lot of people do drugs not because they're pleasure seekers, but because there is something deeply wrong or problematic either in their psyches or their lives or whatever. And I shouldn't have to belabor this point, but I'm just saying. So this is a perfect example, is this person is drinking because for whatever reason, biochemically, psychoanalytically, that drinking shuts down this raging, super egoic voice, which is angry at other people. And not super egoic. I'm sorry, I'll get to that in a second and explain that in a second. But this voice that's angry at other people and begrudges other people and is jealous. And so that is the obvious symptom, right? The obvious symptoms are the alcoholism And then the alcoholism is masking the jealousy, or is helping to deal with the jealousy and the anger. So the obvious symptoms are the jealousy, the envy, the anger, and then the alcoholism that's being used as a coping mechanism. But the question then, from a psychoanalytic perspective, is, well, if this woman's symptom is extreme jealousy and envy, then it might be productive to ask if those symptoms are actually a mask for the real engine, the real motivation of her behavior. Is there something that the envy and the jealousy are masking, that if we actually get to what they are masking, then we'll be to the root of the problem, and then she can start to deal with the root of the problem? And so I started to ask her about her childhood and about her upbringing. And you always want to, I know it's a cliche, but you always want to look at the childhood, because that is the blueprint. That is the foundation. That is, basically our personalities are formed by age 6. So we are almost entirely constructed, we've constructed entirely of things that are totally beyond our choice. And I know people don't like this. People are very wedded to the idea of this sort of perfect free will, and everyone's perfectly responsible for their actions or whatever. Well, in life, people need to take responsibility for their actions. But people are not the ultimate cause of their actions, in the sense that we did not create our biochemistry, we did not create the conditions for our birth and upbringing and our societal context and all that. We just didn't. Now, that doesn't mean then that we say, well, this is not my fault, so I can just do whatever, or I can just be a failure, or I can be an asshole. No, because we do have an ability to rationally work through things or think through things, and people can at least take steps to try to make their situations better, or they can self-analyze, right? What's therapy for? But anyway, my point is that you want to go back to the cause. And so most of the time, you go back to childhood. I know it's cliche, but you go back to childhood, and there you'll find it. So I started to ask her, I asked her to tell me about her childhood, and very, very quickly. I mean, I've only talked to this person probably for an hour total. So, if you know what you're doing, and I'm not touting my own abilities here, right? This is basic psychoanalysis that I'm giving you here. But I'm just saying, if you do have some sense of what you're doing, and some good intuitive sense, and you know some concepts, then you actually can get to the root of things often very quickly. I'm not saying you can solve the problem, but I'm saying you can get far if you know what you're doing. And so I asked, so probably within the course of 2 30-minute sessions, I got to the root of it. And the root of it is this. It turns out that this woman, first of all, that she was not wanted by her mother, or rather that her mother was not able to take care of her, or didn't want to take care of her, or whatever. And so she was abandoned by her mother at a very early age, and she was then raised entirely by her father. So the mother abandoned her responsibility, and the father takes this on. So the first message that this little girl is getting from her primary parent, the mother, and generally speaking, for various psychoanalytic reasons, the mother is considered a kind of primary parent in the early years. I'm not being sexist or whatever, there's just reasons. But she's been abandoned right off the bat by her primary caregiver, by her mother, by the maternal influence in her life. So that in and of itself has a devastating effect. If you are abandoned by your mother and you are raised without a maternal type influence, then that's a problem. That's why, even in a single parent situation, then the parent should be making an effort for that child to have people in their lives to mentor them, and godfathers, godmothers, aunts, uncles, whatever, to take that role. Because I'm sorry, biological sex does mean something. Gender roles do mean something. I'm not saying they're fixed, that gender roles have to be fixed or whatever, but I'm saying that it does mean something if you have a mother or you don't have a mother there, okay? It's just bullshit to say otherwise. I'm not saying that if you don't have a mother, you can't grow up to be healthy or whatever. I'm just saying that you're at a disadvantage, and it does cause issues. We are wired biologically and psychoanalytically, in whatever ways, we are wired to want to have that maternal figure there. So she was without that. And so the message that the child gets is that it is not worthy of the love and the attention of this primary figure. And also you have to understand that when you take the maternal element out, you are taking out the source from which in our early years a lot of the the emotional warmth emanates. I know not everyone has a warm mother, but in general, there is a difference between the way that things are expressed from mother to child than from father to child. Maybe not always, but often. And there is just a qualitative difference in biologically and psychoanalytically and relationally. So you take that mother out of the equation, you take that maternal influence out of the equation, especially if there's nothing there to replace that, and another woman, aunt, a godmother, stepmother, nothing, and you take that out. And so this child is severely handicapped in terms of its relationship to its ability to feel loved and to feel maternal warmth and to feel wanted. So that's a huge strike against this woman from the beginning. And then come to find out very quickly that her father, he really didn't like having this huge responsibility on him, and I understand that. And so in various ways, he clearly projected the idea or clearly transmitted the idea to his daughter that she was a real drag, that she was a real burden, that he didn't want to have this burden, that he was pissed that the mom was out of the picture and he'd had to assume the burden of primary caregiver and raise this girl by himself. And she got the message loud and clear in a number of ways that she wasn't wanted. Now, do I think the guy really didn't love his daughter? No, I don't think that. I think he loved her. And she said that since then, he's shown more love or whatever. But she says that he didn't even tell her growing up that he loved her. He never told her that. Can you imagine? And on top of that, she also, and I'm not going to say which culture, but she also comes from a culture that tends to be less oriented toward consideration of the individual's feelings and emotionality and that sort of thing. So basically, from a very early age, this girl grew up to be a woman. She felt not only unloved, but she felt unworthy of love, deeply unworthy of love. Because look, if it's not rocket science. If the child is not getting signals of love from the parent, then the child correctly deduces that this parent does not love me very much and that I must not be lovable. Now you might say, what do you mean correctly deduces? That parent could have all kinds of problems. It doesn't have anything to do with whether that child is lovable or not. Yeah, it doesn't. But what I'm saying is that the child brain, in some ways, is very clear about the priorities that it sees that adults in its life have. And so when the child sees that this parent wants to do anything else but talk to it or interact with it, or that the parent just can't be bothered, or the parent hates this burden of taking care of this kid, then it's not a crazy notion to deduce, well, I must not be a big priority in their life, or they must not love me enough to overcome whatever issues they have to raise me. I mean, in a sense, it's not an incorrect notion. Now, it doesn't have anything to do, you're right, with the child. It's not like if the child could be more lovable, then the parent would love it. The blame is on the parent. But I'm just saying that the message the child is getting, that I am evidently not special enough, not good enough to get love from my mother or my father, and I'm just this burden and this drag, that's not a crazy notion. And that's exactly, I'm telling you, that's exactly what happened to this woman. And she couldn't see it. We're talking, I asked her, I said, well, why do you think you have these feelings or whatever? I don't know. And then we talk through her upbringing and I point some things out to her. She's like, I never thought about that or whatever, right? Like we can't see these patterns until someone has us walk through it. And that's why learning about psychoanalysis, that's why I do these philosophy and psychology shows, even though they don't get many views and they don't really help my channel, but I do them because people do get a lot out of them. And there are a lot of people who still, even with all the psychology, and the pop psychology in our world and stuff, really, really don't understand these things. So you might say, well, how does that connect to anger and jealousy? Well, here's the thing. This woman has a deep, deep wound at the very center of her being. A very deep wound. And you could say that in some ways her entire identity was constituted around this gap, this wound at the center, which is the fact that she not only did not experience the kind of love growing up that she should have to be healthy, but also that she received the message loud and clear that she wasn't good enough to get love. Because again, that is, even if it's the incorrect assumption, it's still the logical assumption from the child's perspective. I'm not enticing enough for my parent to want to take care of me, or to want to be happy about taking care of me, or whatever. The child brain doesn't understand, oh, dad's an alcoholic, and oh, dad had this really bad breakup with mom, and oh, dad's got his own problems, and it really doesn't have anything to do with me. I could be the best kid in the world, or whatever, right? And still, the kid brain doesn't get that. And the other thing is, apparently this father was very, very hard on her in terms of like her grades and her achievements. He was always pushing her, that grade's not good enough, that grade's not good enough, more and more and more. And so not only was she not getting love to tell her that she was good enough, but she was getting a lot of negative reinforcement from her father, constantly saying that's not good enough, with his ultra high standards. If you're going to have high standards for your kids, let me just tell you something, parents. Nothing wrong with having high standards for your kids, as long as they're not, insane standards, or they're not causing your child too much grief and anxiety, right? But if you're going to have really high standards for your kids, you better reinforce that with a lot of love, because standards and discipline and expectations without a lot of love, that causes problems. That's deeply unhealthy, deeply negative. So the message that she gets from the time she was born is that she is not worthy enough for love. Now, this causes a great wound, and I'm sure, even though she doesn't remember it, because, we repress things or we move on from things, childhood is a long time ago, I'm sure it caused her a great deal of sadness and grief, although she doesn't really remember. And so what happens is that feeling, and this is where I want to explain the symptom thing now, okay? I'm bringing it around. What happens is that feeling of pain is often, it can be so bad that instead of dealing with that, what the psyche seeks to do is it seeks to engage in something known as domestication. And domestication is a huge concept, okay? So if you haven't heard of it before, take note, because this is really the key to a lot of things. I can't tell you how many times in my life I've had, symptoms or issues or psychological, things that I was trying to work through. Again, I'm not talking about like huge stuff like schizophrenia. I'm talking about, the things that a lot of us are trying to work through. And I can't tell you how many times I would finally realize, oh, it's a domestication. I'm domesticating something that I can't deal with. So here's what domestication is. What happens when you domesticate a cat? Let me explain using a metaphor we understand. When you domesticate a cat, what you do is you take something that was wild and uncontrollable and that was causing problems, right? So undomesticated cat is running around, it's not getting other cats knocked up, or it's having kittens, it's spraying all over the place, and it's yowling, and it's bleeding if it's a female, and all this stuff, right? As Trump would say, she was bleeding from her whatever. I'm just completely off the track. No. So the cat's wild. So it's uncontrollable. It's untenable. We can't handle it. We cannot handle this wild cat in its feral state. And so what happens is there's a process of domestication, that either that cat itself can be domesticated, or that cat will have kittens that'll then be raised in a domesticated environment, and they'll be domesticated. But what you're doing when you're domesticating something is you're taking something that is very uncontrollable and something that is that's not sustainable. You can't have this cat running around pissing all over your house or whatever, right? Or having kittens or whatever. So you take that and then you transform it into something that is manageable. Well, I can't handle that crazy cat that's going all over the place, like spraying and having kittens and getting cat gets knocked up and all that. But I can handle this domesticated cat. Now, see, it knows how to use the litter box. It'll let me pet it. It's spayed. It's neutered. That sort of thing. By the way, sex for cats, for female cats, is very painful. I am a cat aficionado, and so I've learned a lot about cats over the years. Like, I've read up on them a lot, and I was surprised to learn that sex for cats is not, for female cats rather, is not pleasant, because when the male cat, ejaculates, it's got these spikes on its penis that come out, and these spikes actually, basically, these when the cats are doing their thing, and the male cat does its thing, and then these spikes come out, and kind of tears at the female cat. And the reason apparently it's doing this is because it somehow helps with ovulation, or it helps clear out other sperm. Or I can't even remember. You can look it up. But if you've ever seen a video of cats mating, this is not something that you probably want to see more than once. But if you've ever seen a video of cats mating, then at the very end of the mating process, all of a sudden, the female cat makes this ungodly, ear-splitting, earth-shattering wail. And that's because the spikes are coming out. So anyway, I guess maybe we don't have it so bad. Although I do think that more women naturally, left to the natural way of things, do die in childbirth more than cats. I don't know how we got off on this tangent. By the way, you do not want to look up how a hyena gives birth. You do not want to look up that shit, because that will ruin your day. And you don't want to look at a diagram of how the baby hyena moves through the female hyena's reproductive system on the way out, because that will mess up your lunch. Anyway, so domesticating things. So here's the thing. Oftentimes, there is an emotion that's really the engine of what's going on with us. That's the real root of the problem. And in this woman's case, that emotion was the raw and terrible and tremendous pain and loss of not being loved. Whether her parents loved her or they didn't or whatever, it doesn't matter what's really going on if the perception, right, is something. And this is something a lot of parents don't understand. They're not listening. Yes, they're listening to what you're saying, but they're looking at what you're doing. And this should be obvious. It's not rocket science, but it is true. So there's this tremendous pain that is foundational to the core of this woman's being. A sense of loss, a sense of not being worthy of love. And I can't even imagine how many times that sad little girl must have asked herself, must have even cried, why? Why does he not love me? Why do I not have a mother? Why is there so little love in my life? And what's wrong with me? I'll tell you, maybe one reason why I relate to this is because I grew up with a narcissistic father. I've talked about it before. He very clearly NPD. And had a strong sadistic streak, psychologically sadistic streak. Anyway, it was very clear to me from a young age that he didn't really love me. And I did not realize as a kid that he loved me as much as he was able, but that he had a problem. And so I got it in my head that if I were a boy, he would love me. And I think maybe this is something that female children get in their heads a lot. And there are reasons, psychoanalytic reasons for it. Even Freud discussed it. Talk about it some other time. But I got it in my head that if I were a boy, he would love me. And so, and this I think is where certain kinds of gender dysphoria come in. Because, you can see looking at me that I wear makeup and stuff, but I'm not a very feminine female. And when I was younger, when I was a kid, I was very much into a tomboy phase. And even in high school, I wore combat boots and stuff like that sometimes. And anyway, my point is, I got this message early on that he didn't love me, and I thought that if I were a boy, he would. And so what I tried to do over the years was I tried to get into things or find interests that we could share that seemed more masculine. So my dad, likes to watch Vietnam War documentaries and war movies, and he, likes to he's more into some of these things that are, for better or worse, stereotypically masculine. Well, I got into those things too. And so in a weird way, the things that I like most about myself now, even my sort of aggressive personality that comes across on YouTube, going after these false accusers and stuff, a lot of that is from a sort of masculine identification that I made when I was younger and I was trying to get my father's love. So, I understand gender dysphoria and stuff. I just don't think that trans ideology is healthy. And I'm glad that I didn't get a sex change when I was going through those things. I don't have to have a sex change. I can just be sort of masculine in the ways I want to be and feminine in the ways I want to be. And I think that's the world we should be wanting. But anyway, get back on the main page. So I understand this feeling. And I used to look at my dad, and not just my dad. I had an issue also with another guy in my life, an uncle growing up who was really loving, but who had to step out of the picture abruptly when my father got jealous of him, the fact that I did have this relationship with my uncle, and he made my uncle leave. And so, I wondered, well, what's happened to my uncle now? He doesn't love me anymore either. So I just remember this aching pain, and I would look at my father, and I would look later after this break with my uncle, and I would think, what did I do? What can I do to make myself more appealing? And it was this deep pain of feeling unloved. And thank God I had a mother who always gave me a lot of unconditional love. But I know how this wounds. This is a deep, deep foundational wound. It is one that is constitutive for our psyche. And so the thing is, I think in this woman's case, she just couldn't handle that pain. And so instead of having to daily experience now the anxiety of thinking, if I'm not good enough for this person, maybe they're going to leave me. Or if I'm not good enough for this person, I'm not going to be loved. What her psyche has done over the years is it has domesticated that horrible feeling of being unloved and that horrible pain and anxiety surrounding that feeling, and it has transformed it into a symptom that is still very difficult, but one that is not as close to the target. You see, that's what our psyche does when it tries to domesticate emotions or tries to mask emotions, is it tries to move us away from the target because the target is so painful. The real root of that is so painful. And so it'll move us away with a decoy. Hey, you're not feeling unloved. You're not feeling this deep pain from being unloved, and you're not feeling this deep pain from thinking that you're unlovable. You're feeling jealousy. You're feeling jealousy of an envy toward other people, because as much as that sucks, it ain't nearly as bad as being on the target. And so what I came to see very quickly through talking with her, not only about her childhood, but also about the manifestations of this symptom, I asked her, okay, well, when do you feel this jealousy most strongly? Or when do you feel this envy most strongly? Or what does it feel like? Or how do you think through that in your mind, right? It became very clear to me that the feeling of jealousy that she has is actually linked to a feeling of fear of being unloved and unlovable. Because here's the thing, all right? Her jealousy, it wasn't about the things that other people had that she actually wanted. Because I talked to her, I said, well, okay, these things that you feel jealous of, maybe you're just really upset that you haven't, you see someone else has a better job, and maybe you're just unfulfilled in your career. But it soon became clear in talking to her that it wasn't about the object of her jealousy, right? Because she was jealous of all kinds of things. And then when I talked to her, I came to see that she didn't even really care that much about the things that she was actually jealous of. It was more the jealousy itself was the problem, and was manifesting itself in all kinds of ways. And again, that's why she had to drink to shut that off, right? And so if you think about what jealousy is a feeling that other people have something that we either feel that we should be entitled to, or that we wish that we were good enough to be entitled to, right? So for instance, if I look at my friend who got into Harvard, and I didn't get into Harvard, maybe I applied, right? I apply to Harvard, my friend applies to Harvard, my friend gets in, I don't. The jealousy comes in that instance from recognizing the fact that this person, at least in this way, was better than me. This person was either smarter than me to get into Harvard, or they wrote a better essay, or they had better grades, but basically, in some ways, that person was more deserving, or at least was seen as being more deserving, was seen as being more worthy. And what is the problem that this girl had in her childhood is that she was constantly given the message that she was not worthy of love. See, this is how you know when you're working through stuff. This is how you know you're hitting the target, because this will happen. Jealousy, envy, those things, those are rarely the target. This is the target, this thing. So what was happening is that this woman actually is terrified of losing the love of people in her life, or of being unlovable, and she has great pain over this huge loss and this huge hole in her life of being unlovable. And so what her psyche has done is it has taken that terrible emotion and it has domesticated it into jealousy and envy, because jealousy and envy fixate on the notion that other people are more worthy or more lovable, right? Well, I guess Harvard loved that person more than me. I mean, that's basically the message. I know it sounds kind of silly, but that's the message. I apply to Harvard. My friend applies to Harvard. I don't get in. She gets in. Harvard loved her more. And it's interesting because I asked this woman, I asked her, okay, in what way are you feeling this emotion of jealousy most intensely in your life right now? And she told me that she was feeling it in relation to her boyfriend. She's been with a guy for about a year. And she said that she is jealous of him because he has a better job than her. And also, she found out recently that she is probably going to lose her job, is probably going to be laid off, not for any faults of her own, but stuff the company is going through. And she feels tremendous jealousy and anger and envy at the fact that this is what she said, she feels tremendous jealousy and anger and envy at the fact that if she loses her job, her boyfriend might look at her and might think that he's better than her. You know what I said? I said, you're not scared that you're not upset or scared that your boyfriend, well, this is what I said, you're not angry that your boyfriend might think that he's better than you. You are terrified that your boyfriend is going to think that you're not worthy and is going to leave you and is not going to love you, just like your mom left you and your dad didn't seem to love you. She can't handle the tremendous fear that if her boyfriend finds out that she lost her job and that she's kind of a professional dud, and I'm not saying she is, but I'm saying that's the message people get. Look, I've lost my job before. No matter what the reasons, the context, or whatever, you still feel like a dud, and that's normal. She is terrified that her boyfriend is going to look at her and is going to see her as an unlovable dud, just like her dad, just like her mom. And so because she can't deal with that, she can't deal with that pain and that fear and that loss, then what she does is she domesticates it into something that she can deal with. Oh, my boyfriend, he's such an asshole. He thinks he's better than me. Jealousy, envy, anger, those sorts of things. So that's the conclusion that we came to after a couple of sessions with her. Just not sessions, but chats, right? Again, I'm not a therapist. But just a couple of chats with her. And that's, that's the conclusion I'd come to if I were talking to a friend and everything. This is how, you get through things. And a lot of us know this intuitively, even if we don't even know the psychoanalysis, right? But so what I would say to you then is, have you considered this problem that you haven't been able to get over, this fixation or this compulsion or this unwelcome feeling or syndrome or whatever? Have you considered what it might be doing for you in a positive sense? Have you considered that it might be actually fulfilling some kind of a need that you have? Or have you considered that it might be masking something deeper that you're not aware of, or something more disturbing? Or that might be domesticating something that you haven't dealt with? Have you considered that? And sometimes, even if there's not something deep-seated going on, like way back to our past, sometimes, our symptom just might be doing something for us in the present, right? My depression, for instance, and I do think my depression is real and it runs in our family, and I do think that it's not just a symptom that I'm just making up, right? But I have to concede that even my depression does things for me sometimes. What does it do? Well, it allows me to get out of things that I would otherwise have to participate in. Well, I would engage in this sort of tiresome conversation at this Christmas party, but I'm depressed and people know that, so I don't have to. I don't have to try. Or I would help my mom out with this problem, or I would help this person out with this problem, or I would do this, take on this responsibility or whatever, but I've got this problem with depression. I just can't handle a lot of stuff. And that's true. It is true. I can't handle a lot of stuff. But also there are times that it's serving a purpose. And it's not about blaming yourself. It's not about saying this is all my fault. No, because again, you did not create yourself. But one of the things that can be helpful in trying to solve or at least address your issues is figuring out, okay, where is this really coming from? And is this a symptom of something that I haven't looked at and I need to look at? It turns out maybe I'm not actually fundamentally jealous and envious and spiteful. It turns out actually that maybe I am deeply, deeply wounded by abandonment issues and by poor parenting and a lot of other things. And that's what I think was going on with that girl. So anyway, I hope you got something out of this. And if so, I always appreciate your support. Like I said, these videos do not do well, and I really just make them because people like them. And so any tips are appreciated just to show that you enjoy this kind of content, and the links are below. And if you are interested in having a chat with me, again, I'm not a professional, and we might not be able to come to any deeper insights, but, you know, maybe it'd be cool for you to do that. So you can sign on for that on my Patreon, and you can do it month to month if you want to. You can always just do it once and then, you know, cancel or whatever. But it's $29 for 29 minutes. And I'm about to publish on my Patreon page a new set of appointment times, so you can sign up today. Later today, I'll have that up. All right, everybody. Yeah, I'm going to have more videos out. Check out my philosophy and psychology playlist if you enjoyed this. I've got a bunch more videos where this came from. And as always, yeah, thanks.